Don't be.
The meaning just in terms of how you. I'll tell you something. You know, I'm a one of my jokes in the community is I'm a retired rabbi. I used to be the assistant rabbi at Fifth Avenue Synagogue in the city. Yes.
Wow.
So one of the things I miss most about the rabbinate, is I miss the rabbi's eye of the community. Okay, you know, the rabbi, meaning every person, even if they never come to synagogue, there's something special about everyone. You know, you realize when you're with the community, with the synagogue, that everyone has something. There's something special about everyone. Like this person, you may see him 3 times a year, and not really that interested in religion. You often wonder why they even come, and then you realize, oh my God, that person has a really special relationship with brother, father, sister, mother, or some cause or something that that is, you know, that's just, you know, unique. That's you know, that's so I'm just that's what I miss. I miss the rabbi's perspective. And a psychologist, but I once told that to a pharmacist. And he said, well, then you should know that as a pharmacist, I have it worse. If I'm giving out medicine in my community, I know who's dying. I know who's, you know, on, you know, under severe psychotic medications, and I know everything. And the same thing would apply to family law and to psychology.
Yes, it does, especially dealing within a community. And we have a lot of clients within close quarters of each other. It's a lot of detail. Yeah. A lot of detail.
Okay. Oh, we're just playing with the lighting, Dr. Castro.
Yes, I see it.
What about, why don't you go to the side? Why don't you put the lighting on the side? No, just like a off camera, but like right next to the head or something like that. No? Just
That's because that's the you're watching it wrong. It's the it's the YouTube stream.
Oh.
It's still round, still circle.
but why don't we just put it like next to one of our heads, no?
Put it in the middle of my head as a halo.
No, we're not doing that.
Okay. This is the right crowd for
By the way, it made it better now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I think we are ready. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. So you tell me when we're no, yeah, we on what's the timing? What's the we're 101. Oh, okay, so let's stop. So okay. Welcome to the offices of the Jewish Link. We're here for a very, very special webinar. I'm here with actually Bob Kornitzer, who I'll tell you a little more about in a second. The webinar today, which thank God we have a lot of people signed up for and people online, is called Co-Parenting with a Difficult Ex-Spouse. The truth is, when I say a title like that, I kind of hope that not that many people can relate to it, but the answer is it's a reality today. And the webinar today is with we advertised it online, offline, you name it, and we're here. It's Wednesday, 1 o'clock. It's also deadline day for the Jewish Link, so hopefully we'll be able to come out with the paper tonight as well. I'm sitting here with Bob Kornitzer. Okay, Robert is the name partner, principal partner of Kornitzer Law. I believe from what I read is that you are I think you've been for at least 4 decades or so in matrimonial family law, all
Correct.
aspects of family law.
Correct.
And we're certainly going to hear more about it. We also have online here Dr. Nadine Castro. Dr. Castro is based in Rockland County in upstate New York, or I guess relatively upstate New York, has decades of experience as a psychologist, and looking forward to hearing looking forward to this webinar. We have a number of topics to take on, and truth is, I'll let Bob begin a little bit. So,
well, we're going to start with discussing in general. We're focusing on how to deal with an ex. It could be an ex-spouse, it could be an ex-partner, and we're looking at how to approach a long-term process to co-parenting. It's a very difficult issue for a lot of people. There's no one size fits all. We're not going to be able to give you solutions for every situation. And I don't want anyone to think that we'll be able to solve every problem that you ever have. there's many problems that have existed in parenting relationships. Some of these existed before you split up. Some of them existed during the split when you're in court. And some of them formed after the split, after you're in separate households. And when you're trying to manage those separate households and you're trying to manage kids in separate households. My principal job is to try to keep you out of court and to try to minimize some of the conflicts that develop. I'll be discussing from a legal perspective, but from a practical perspective. People come to me when they have these problems, either during litigation, and I'm talking about at the end of litigation when you're preparing a settlement agreement. You might already be separated, but definitely after you've separated and after you're divorced, for instance, when issues arise and coping skills are needed, they're not taught to you at any time. There's no one class for these, even though there are parenting classes, so to speak. But you have to learn on your own, in your own situation, what type of skills you can develop to stay out of court, to resolve problems, to help your kids out, to keep them stress-free, to keep yourself stress-free, and really for problem solving.
And actually, thank you, Bob. I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. Dr. Castro, I think we wanted to hear a little bit from you, but I think Bob just gave a nice introduction to what he's going to tell us. Dr. Castro, I think you're going to talk a little about. I'll let you'll talk about the kind of what goes into a separation and breakdown.
Okay, so I want to start by emphasizing how funny, ironic, paradoxical the title of the webinar is: Co-parenting with a difficult ex-spouse. It's ironic because, of course, the people that I see most of the time tell me that the co-spouse, their co-spouse, is difficult. But I am assuming that I see only the half of the spouses that are never difficult, because everybody says that the other spouse is very difficult. And the paradox is that most of the time, the people that I see have finished the process of the decision making, and they are at this point, they have already decided that they want to be separated, or they want to be divorced, or they are divorced. So they have two households, and they have decided to be separated because they couldn't get along, because they could not compromise, because they could not discuss and make decisions together and live together. And now all of a sudden they have to cooperate, and they have to do the very difficult job of raising children together.
Dr. Castro, just want to interject, yes. or maybe just finish that sentence. Finish. I just want to say we often hear accusations of, like, that my ex is a narcissist or has a borderline personality. I've never understood, when the tension, when the perception of the ex-spouse is so bad, I don't even understand how they can co-parent like that. It's mind-boggling to me. And I know it's Bob, and your job is to try to smooth that through. But I know, why do they do that?
But you see, Moshe, I think that most of the time, it feels so bad to have come to the decision to divorce that it's very, very normal, it's natural to look for who is at fault, right? Why did I fail so badly? And of course, after having fought and having made this very difficult and painful decision for everybody, it's easy to say, well, it's the fault of the other person. And then it's not a long shot to go and say, well, of course, it's his fault or it's her fault because they're crazy. It's not because, so they're crazy. They start trying to look for a diagnosis that will explain it. But I want to say, to begin with, that one of the worst things that one can do if one can stop oneself, is first of all to try to diagnose the other parent and give them a name or call them anything. Because again, first of all, it's not helpful. It's not even helpful for somebody in my profession to give a name to, I mean, to give a diagnosis, because it doesn't help me find how to deal with it, with the, you know, with the person that I am treating. And secondly, for the children, first of all, they hear you calling names. They hear perhaps the other parent calling them names. The children have, whether you want it or not, half of the genetics of that parent that you are calling narcissistic or crazy or,
Although some may argue that they actually have more. Like if you hate the ex, they may say he has like 80% of his or her genes. So correct.
Right. But it's not good for the child, because
Yes.
eventually the child will feel, well, then maybe this is what I am as well. So I think that this part is probably a very, very, very good first step of trying not to label the other parent if you can, because it's not helpful and it's very destructive. And so that this is a first step to really, really try to remember, and remember that the other parent feels the same way about you. So, or feels, now, one of the very, very important next step, once you have realized that you're angry, you're disappointed, you're trying to find who is responsible, who is to blame. It's the other person, of course, but you need to keep in mind and separate between, if you think that there is real danger for the children, then you have to immediately go for professional help. What I mean is you have to call the social services, you have immediately to go to a lawyer, you have to go to the police, meaning that if there is danger, meaning if you think that the other parent is crazy, and I am putting this time crazy not as a quotation, but real crazy, and that the child could be in danger, then of course you have to do something about it. But if you realize that this is only in part the result of your feeling, you're feeling bitter, you're feeling disappointed, you're feeling hurt, then perhaps it's a very good reason to say, okay, it doesn't matter what the other parent is, it's not dangerous, so let's try to see how we can concentrate on what's best for the child. What would be best for the child in this situation when the children have more than one household? And I think we can all agree that what's most important for a child is consistency, it is predictability, it is routines. When you have a child, that children really, really enjoy when things keep repeating in the same way, where they can hope for something and it happens. So you have to make it predictable. You have to keep a very respectful attitude toward the child, so that the child knows to be respectful toward himself and toward other children and toward his other parents.
Dr. Kath, I think just to interrupt for 1 second, I just
Sure.
we often hear of that the consistency issue you raise is a big one. Often hear about kids go to mother or father, in the father's house, let's say they have many more toys or many more, and they're much later bedtime. Those are big issues, is what you're saying. That the way they're treated in one household versus the other is a huge deal.
It's a huge deal, but it isn't. because I have news for you, and I think that it is the best news that you could find out in a place like this, if you want to listen to a webinar like that, which is that the children need consistency within the household. They know they do not need consistency between the household. Children, even very tiny children, understand right away what they can expect in one household from one parent, in the other household for the other parent. They may ask, but understand right away when you say to them, oh no, at daddy's, this is what happens, at mommy's, this is what happens. They understand. And if you can keep consistent within the household, you don't need to worry that it's not consistent between the households.
At what age are we talking about? What's you mentioned even little kids. What age does the child begin to see, know, or understand these kind of things by themselves?
Honestly, I think that from very little babies, I mean, anybody who's had babies can tell you that even a 6-month-old baby, an 8-month-old baby knows to cry with mommy in a different way that they cry with daddy. They get things from one parent that they don't get from the other. I think children are very adaptable. They're very smart. They observe and they learn from their firsthand experience, and they adapt. And yes, they do sometimes at the age of 2 or the age of 3 try to push boundaries at the age of 6, at the age of 10, and say, oh, at daddy's, I can do such and so. And it's very easy to say, well, yes, daddy, you can do it. But here, these are our rules. These are our customs. So this is what we do here. And the child, if you're very loving, firm, kind, and this becomes their habit, they know.
Yeah.
So
Dr. Castro.
I wouldn't worry about that. Yes.
Dr. Castro, can I ask you, because what you're
Sure.
discussing now is such a common complaint that I hear in my office, where one parent says, I bathe the kid by 7:30, kid's in bed by 8 o'clock, gets a good night's sleep, ready for school the next day. But in the other house, the kid's on his iPad till 10:30 at night and then watching late night TV. And the parent's very upset and saying, the kid is going to fail now in school. So at what point does it become a problem? And at what point do I say, you just have to ignore it for now, 2 households?
Well, okay. So the problem starts, I mean, before I was talking about danger, about real problem, meaning that if the child starts showing medical signs that the child is not getting enough sleep, that the child is not being fed properly, if there is medical signs, if it's not just the impression of one parent in relation to the other, but you can see, or people from school start complaining, the child is not performing properly, is falling asleep, then there is a problem, a real problem. But before that, it's a question of preference, and it is not worth trying to do something that you have failed at when you were married to this person. You were trying to make them act a certain way, and you did not succeed. This is why you've had to divorce him or her. So you see, there is a range of things where going with the flow is much better, and trusting that in the end, the other parent loves the child and is raising the child, hopefully, without trying to hurt them. So I would say, it's not worth, I mean, unless you know that that the child is being harmed, let it go. Because for half of the time, in most cases, or sometimes more, the child is going to be with the parent. And in that case, the parent that comes to you for help, right? At the time when the child is with your client, my patient, right? That person is 100% responsible for his or her parenting. That is a time when that parent can decide the rules of the game, can decide, how much consistency, what kind of rules to apply, why to apply them, how do you teach the child? And I say always that children never learn from lessons, they learn from example. So that the parent that is your client or that is my patient needs to learn how to give the good example to that child, how to give them the right kind of parenting.
Dr. Kessler,
And
can
if
I
they-
just, yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
Sure,
finish that
sure.
sentence. No, finish that sentence. Finish what you're about to say.
But in that case, if in the case that that parent is not able and feels unable to do the parenting, doesn't know how to do the parenting, this is when you see they knock at my door, because this
Okay.
is when they need help, right?
Oh, let me just stop. We actually got a question now also, but it's actually the question I was going to ask. The question really was about, and it really ties into it. First of all, it's a big thing that you said in terms of trusting the ex. You have to trust. I like that because we don't live in a perfect world. Obviously, people who are going through a divorce are not in a perfect world. But you have to trust that at least your spouse is your ex is at least wants the best for their child in his or her own way. The question I think our readership, our viewers are interested in is, what if there's really big religious differences? And I know this is both a psychological counseling, and I know Bob is also on the religious side a very big factor. What do you do if there are huge religious differences between one spouse or the other?
Well, I guess there's no easy way. And I am sure that some of those issues may have been the reasons for the divorce. Some of those issues may become worse after the divorce. People drift apart sometimes, religiously speaking, and there is not an easy fix. But I would say that this is when the idea of trying to be extremely consistent, extremely respectful, extremely consistent within your own household, and try to explain to the child or children at the level that they can understand why it is that at mommy's, this is how we are going to behave. This is what we do. This is why we do it. And I am sure that, in every household, you do eventually explain to your children why you're doing what you're doing and how you're doing it. So all of that can be handled with understanding that outside of your household, the child may not maybe eat kosher, or the child may not respect Shabbat. Now,
Or the ex, you
course,
mean, or the ex, meaning the ex.
of course,
Yeah.
yes, I am talking at the household, in the household of the ex. You may know that this is what's happening to the child. Naturally, I think that this is a time when it would not come. I think people would not come to me for advice, but they would come to you, or maybe they would come to their lawyer to try to have some kind of, compromise. They would go to the rabbi, maybe, to try to see if they can compromise at least on some issues, because there are very, very big issues about which schools to send the kids. Of course.
Dr. Castro, let me switch to Bob, because you mentioned
Sure.
already that going to a rabbi, going to
Sure.
going to a lawyer. This was actually, this makes
Right.
segues nicely into our next
Sure.
topic, which really is the legal conflict aspect of the,
Sure.
and maybe you can, Bob, you just pick up where she was, where Dr. Where the doctor left off. So.
Well, Doctor, what you were discussing and some of the conflict within the households as to the level of practice of religion, or even whether it's the same religion. This was actually a subject of a seminar I did a couple of years ago. There's very developing case law on this. And the bottom line right now is that there's a lot of leeway given to each parent to at least teach the kids what they believe in their household at the time. It used to be much stricter from the courts that if you were, say, raised Orthodox, you're going to be Orthodox right now. Right now, the way it stands is that you can teach your kids if you're embracing some other aspect of religion or even different religion. But you have to respect that the child out in society needs some kind of stability. So while you can teach them in your household and introduce them even to partners of yours, which has happened, you still need to respect that a child should not be torn to the outside world in two different worlds. So if the kid's in the yeshiva, the kid's in the same yeshiva. But the child will learn that you're not always doing the same thing in your own household. And this is actually a very obviously sensitive subject. This is a subject where, Dr. Castro, I don't know if you noticed the same, but people really don't want to compromise in this area. Parents really hesitate. So
of course.
You're saying that the case law has changed, meaning it used to be that the courts would just say, hey, the kid was raised Orthodox, I don't care where you are, you got to stay. And now they're saying is, hey, you got it. The courts are like society's changing a little bit.
Yes, and what I've seen happen is that, for instance, when you're in court, and if the argument is from the parent who's maintaining the same level of religious practice, the child should not be in the other household so much because they're being taught the wrong things. So right now, in the past, the court might have said, yes, we agree, until the other parent agrees to observe the same within their household. You have to stay kosher. You have to have the same tznius. You have to dress the same. You have to act the same. Right now, there's much more leeway, and as long as you're not forcing the child to do something that is in direct conflict. So it's kind of more limited to actions. You're not forcing the kid to do something different. And that's the tendency with judges also. And now with the whole issue, translate it now to the whole transgender situation, which I was just in court 2 weeks ago on that subject with Orthodox families. And it's in flux right now. I have to say, I don't know that judges themselves have much guidance. Obviously, if you're in a bet din, there's going to be a little more direct guidance or opinions, but I'm not certain how much leeway they'll be receiving in any forum right now.
But
By the way, yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Dr. Castro.
By the way, I was treating a family with 5 children, and one of the parents left the very Orthodox family and became completely non-Orthodox. And the children, after a few years, they are now in their early adolescence and adolescence. 2 of them have remained very, very Orthodox. 2 of them are, very comfortable with Orthodox, customs, rituals, and so forth when they go with their father. But when they go to their mother, who is no longer, doing her, she's no longer Orthodox, they are very comfortable with the mother as well. And so the fifth child is, in between, has not yet decided, but the children have been very, very comfortable navigating. The only thing that was, I think that the mother maintained was she has maintained the possibility in her kitchen to have entirely Orthodox food, meaning the children who want to continue to be entirely kosher are able to be entirely kosher, and she respects that and does it. But otherwise, out of 5 children, everyone has been able to pursue their way, and they are trying to find their way. But there is no, I think that forcing the children or forcing the parent who no longer wants to do it this way, to do it in a certain way, because the judge had told them to do that, I think would be to almost tempt the children to be against it.
I always like examples. I get it. Actually, I just want to turn it back to Bob. We talked about, I didn't read, I jumped the gun a little bit, but part of the topics would be the toolbox that we have. So that you have, we talked a little bit about, so to speak, the tools, and Dr. Nadine, Dr. Castro spoke about. Let's talk a little about the toolbox from a legal perspective.
The toolbox is not, it is from a legal perspective, but it's also mainly from a practical perspective. So what we try to do is help people problem solve. And a lot of that is on the individuals, on the parents themselves. They have to make an effort to focus themselves so that there are certain practices they're going to put into place in their lives, which might be very different from how they handled things before. But if you want to be able to problem solve, to co-parent effectively with somebody that you're no longer sharing a life with, there's certain principles that I really advise clients, and I'll go through a few of those now.
Please.
Okay, and the first one is communication. I can't tell you, obviously people are divorced, but I can't tell you how poorly many people communicate with each other. And it might be just because the other parent is triggering you. Everything they say right away, you're assuming the worst. But first problem with communication is often there's too much communication. Sometimes there's too little communication, or you have the wrong kind of communication. So these are things just to start being mindful of how you communicate, how much you communicate. The other parent, this is a business right now. Parenting your children is a business. Really, you have to take care of your end. The other parent has to take care of their end. So when you're in business, you communicate as necessary. You don't offer too much. You don't give into a life history. You don't sit there and say, I would like to do the following, because your history is that you're a lousy, stupid, uncooperative person who doesn't love his children. No, you won't put it that way. You say, this is what I need to say. This is what needs to be done.
But I actually like that idea of a ex-spouse as business partner. I never thought of that. Meaning that in business, you don't like everyone you're in business with, but you know you're partners with them.
But you have a goal.
Mhm.
I mean, you should have a common goal, but at least you know that even if you don't trust the other person's motives, you know that you have a goal. It's to raise well-adjusted children and to also have a good life for yourself, so that your entire life is not spent obsessing about what the other parent might do. So you say what you need to say. The biggest faux pas that people do is texting. Texting makes me nuts when people send to me a string of hundreds of texts, and half of them are insults to each other, and they might be over the most mundane, tiny issue. but control yourself. What is the subject you're doing? It's pickup time. Don't tell the other parent, well, you missed the following 12 pickup times. You were 3 minutes late this time. You were 5 minutes too early the other time. Focus on what you need to focus, the right amount. Here's the subject, and this is what we're dealing with. Communication, a lot of times you can address it to a certain level if you know the problem's coming in your settlement agreement. So when the person is on the path to becoming an X, you say, this is how we have to communicate. The following issues need to be in writing. And for instance, we're going to use a program like Our Family Wizard. There's other programs like that. And what they do is they monitor what you're saying. Believe it or not, if you're about to drop 4-letter bombs on the other, the program will tell you, you might want to rethink how you're phrasing this.
Wow. I never knew that.
Nice.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Is this common, by the
Yeah.
way?
Yes. Courts, judges love it because the programs like this, you can actually print everything in the string and a court will accept it. It's not like texting where you can manufacture it, emails where you can spoof the other person very easily. These are companies that it's very inexpensive, like $100 a person a year. So you can monitor what you're saying and you can control the quantity of what you're saying. So also then with the communication issue, if you really can't communicate with the other person,
Which happen? How often does that happen? Or complete communication breakdown?
very little. But where it will happen generally is on a hot button subject. So if, let's say, religion is the hot button subject or something like that, or dealing with a new person in that person's life is a hot button subject, then you might have to bring in a third party. So we're discussing bet-ins or arbitrators like that, but a bet-in is especially adept with handling narrower issues. You go for a
Right.
specific purpose and they will not only guide you, but they'll guide you in a way that they'll say, let's discuss it. But if we can't resolve it voluntarily, we're going to tell you what needs to be done.
How to
That
do it.
differentiates, you agree, doctor?
Yeah.
Yes.
That differentiates, which, listen, I do mediation, I'm a parent coordinator. These are other functions where these are third parties who get involved, but they're not involved on a basis where they have a final say. And what I find often is where mediation and parent coordination can be helpful, but sometimes if you don't have the knowledge that you will have some finality on this issue, it's very hard to focus both people on agreeing to something. A lot of times you'll agree to something because you know that person, somebody's going to make a decision, so I better be reasonable with that. So, speaking to a rabbi, speaking to a therapist, a child's therapist especially, a trusted member of both of you in your community that you respect. Sometimes you just need somebody to help you communicate, to make a call on an issue where you cannot communicate.
Doc, I'll just want to talk about Dr. Castro. You've been asked to serve in that role as a communicator, as to be the go-between, a shaliach, so to speak.
Definitely. And sometimes it's very helpful because if both parents can agree that they can trust, this third person, it helps them not have an attachment to their own solution because they have this other person who sometimes comes up with other ideas of how to resolve the situation, and is not identified as being on one side or the other. Yes.
Okay.
So the next suggestion, which I have, and this really varies. Again, the point you were raising was very good because not all issues are alike. And for instance, parenting schedules. There are couples who might not be able to talk on certain subjects, but when it comes to scheduling for the children and to be able to accommodate each other, they're phenomenal. So sometimes in a parenting agreement, there's language like the schedule will be liberal and reasonable or something, or we're going to split time, or we're going to share holidays equally. And that's all the detail that's in there. You have a couple of lines. And that's all you really need with these parents. They might disagree on other subjects, schooling, other things savagely, but they're both very good with each other. But you have to know who your partner was. With some people, you need exact times. You need to say, pickup is at 2:58 p.m. after school on the front stoop of the school, and you will do the homework with the child, and you will, feed dinner to the child, and you will not feed them a gluten product because they need to be gluten-free. And sometimes you need that detail, whether it comes to holidays, whether it comes to a regular parenting schedule, whether it comes to vacations. You have to give 6 months notice, give the other parent 3 weeks to respond. Sometimes you need that detail with the other parent. So you need to know who you're dealing with. And if you think that person has a problem with having a more broad, loose schedule that's flexible, or if you have a problem with that, you need to recognize it in yourself and get into written detail when you need to. And sometimes that can resolve a lot of problems, because there's nothing worse than if you just have an open-ended, liberal and reasonable agreement, or we're going to split holidays 50-50. What time do they start during the day? What time do they end? It include overnight. So you have to know yourself as well as your partner with those.
Wow.
But sometimes,
Go ahead, Dr. Cass.
yeah, but sometimes you have a partner for whom it's been very spelled out, but they don't show up to pick up the child from school. They bring the child 2 hours late. They bring him back. So sometimes there is a problem, even if things are very well taken care of in terms of, the organization. And that is another, challenge for the parent who is responsible with the schedule, who is expecting things to happen according to a certain, predictability. And then what do you do in terms of, is that something that clients come to you as a lawyer and say, he is not respecting or she's not respecting her schedule?
All the time. That might be one of the most common things we have coming in. And
how do you resolve it? Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of levels. First of all, this is one of the reasons that everybody has to keep in mind that they might have to go back to a decision maker at some point. Not everything is resolvable. And again, sometimes it's just a limited issue like timeliness. Some people can never be on time. They're not responsible. So the other parent has to know that you will go to the next step. You're not just going to complain about it. If somebody is really playing games with the child, because that's who you're really hurting. A kid sitting at the door, little kid with a backpack, waiting to go out in the middle of winter, and mom or dad never shows up over there. So the other parent has to know, and that's in your toolbox, that you will go to court, you will go to a bet-in, you will go to an arbitrator. Even you will go to a mediator who can potentially report to somebody else. But being able to take the next step, or having the threat there that you can take the next step, that is a big deal. And unfortunately, it's necessary. I mean, behind all our laws, there's a potential penalty. I mean, you can go out and punch somebody in the face in the street. There's a potential penalty. So you can't stop a bad act, but you can have the other person understand, if you take that bad act, I will do something about it. Mm-hmm. And that's something that is in your toolbox. Yeah. A bet-in is especially adept, again, at a narrow issue like that. If you have lack of timeliness, lack of, say, cooperation, where one parent is never letting the child ever go to the other family's shidduch or to some event on that first parent's time. These are the types of things that a narrow arbitration can really resolve quickly.
You know, I was going to ask you about some of the mistakes that couples make. I think you already kind of addressed them: too much communication, too little communication. So a couple comes to you and uses Dr. Franco, Dr. Castro, Nadine, and Bob, and it's not working. They haven't reached an agreement. You know, they're what do you do? Like, if they're really at an impasse, or have you ever been flummoxed, so to speak?
Oh, completely, because there's not answers for all of this. We're dealing with people, in real situations, and you never know what's going on with the children. So again, you have to have the implied threat that if the other person is really doing something wrong, that'll harm the kids, and not like Dr. Castro says, you respect that different households are different. You need to be able to take it to the next level sometimes, or at least have the other parent understand that if they continue their conduct, you'll be going to the next level. But to me, and Dr. Castro, I'm gonna invite you to really comment on this, because a lot of times I'll tell parents, there is a problem over here, and the person comes in and states the problem, but you're part of the problem yourself, because maybe, for instance, the other parent didn't cooperate and said a child cannot go to a sport or to an activity. Then
Right.
the more you learn and you find out that your client let the other person know a day in advance about it, didn't research it properly, the costs were too large. So, sometimes it's both people have to look in the mirror a little bit and say, did I do anything to contribute to the problem? And that's really the way to resolve a problem. You look at not only that the other person is not, why is the other person not timely? Maybe it's something that you're doing at your end. As far, maybe there's no cooperation because something at your end also. And I'm not saying that's always true, but I always tell a client, look at yourself as well. And Dr. Castro's point early on, so let me ask Dr. Castro, because this is always a joke in my office.
Yes.
Dr. Castro, has anybody ever walked into your office and said, let me tell you something, I am selfish, I want what I want, I care about myself, I love my children, but what's good for me is good for them? Have anybody ever walked in and said,
No, I mean,
big part of the problem?
the people who are part of the problem somehow never find my name in the book. I never saw one, never. This is why you're right. I mean, this is one of the first lesson is to learn that because there is not such a person that says, I am having problems with my ex-spouse because I am difficult, right? That it is very useful for any parent who wants things to work well with for the children to first figure out whether there is anything that they can change to accommodate, to be more flexible, to help, to be reasonable, to communicate, of course, to cooperate with the other parent, because that you can always change. Yourself, you can always change. The other person, you can't.
And do you find that if a parent comes in and shows a complete lack of respect for the other parent, how do you believe that impacts not only their relationship and ability to communicate, but the children?
It is terrible, because the children learn to respect by being respected. They learn to respect by seeing respect and by experiencing respect. So in a sense, the parent who is disrespectful needs to understand that they are teaching the child how to be disrespectful. They are teaching the child how to disrespect them, meaning disrespecting is actually creating the situation where you're going to be disrespected. And this is something that I take time trying to explain to the people that I work with, that nobody learns from being lectured, or, maybe in school you do. But in terms of psychology, in terms of behavior, you learn from what you see and from what you are exposed to. So, I try to tell the parents that if they could speak more respectfully about the other parent and to the child, that eventually they would create more respect toward themselves.
So
It's a mirror.
I like that answer, Dr. Castro. We're getting some questions in online. We're going to open it up. I just want to open it to one last question, which is actually a question I asked you on the last one, which is Baisden. Okay, I think I asked you very clearly, how you work together with Baisden. How the question is are couples going to Baisden first, last? Where's Bob Kornitzer and also Dr. Castro? Where are you on the Baisden, so to speak? Because it's not an arbitration panel. They're not a full secular court. They're kind of, I guess maybe they're somewhere in between. But I'd like to hear, what's going. How do you see Baisden in the modern divorce?
Well, what I see is that, number one, the court system right now is very broken to the extent, especially that the courts are so understaffed with judges right now that I've been told, for instance, one case in Morris County will be 6 years till the potential trial. Passaic County, they're going to be stopping all trials very shortly. Many counties, they've stopped trials. When you announce that you've stopped trials, what you've basically said is nobody has to cooperate because nothing's going to happen. So Baisden, like other arbitrators, I mean, they're a bottom line decision-making organizations. What I find is the more mainstream Baisdens, which I mean that there are Baisdens that want only attorneys there. They don't want just Toains who are just friends or people in the community. They want lawyers there, people with legal background who understand halacha, who understand this secular system as well. So they offer an alternative that you can get decisions made. What Baisdens offer, which is wonderful, is a formalized mediation and arbitration track where you can start with mediation and then you can move on to arbitration. And there's all kinds of rules about these things, but even in New Jersey with custody, you can go the custody route where you used to not be able to do that. So it's an important forum. It's not for everybody though, because, halacha has certain rules. Alimony is a very touchy issue, which is where I have the biggest problem. Traditions as far as what type of custody a father will receive with the daughter or a mother with the son in long term. These are issues that not everybody wants to accept. What I find is even in the Orthodox world, even in the Hasidic world, often people want what they see in society a little more to mimic because the secular courts have come a long way. And
You just said they're broken.
They're broken, but the rules behind them, the laws really reflect what most people want. And there's not many, it's still, there's gender specific issues that take place in a Baisden potentially, and it's up to each person really. But, I have a lot more of my work going there right now. And if you want decision-making and finality and you want ongoing process, in other words, when you're finished with the court, you're finished with the court. You have to start afresh. When you're with a Baisden, you could say, we're going to continue afterwards, and they'll hear you very quickly. So it's a powerful tool, but you have to navigate it properly. It's not for everybody, and you really need to be guided. And don't just close your eyes and with blinders and say, I trust that everything will work out. That's just not smart to do.
Dr. Castro, anything to add on that? And then we'll go to a few questions.
No, not really. No. Yes.
Okay. So I'm just looking at some of the questions that we got. We got a number of questions. I think the first question was about alienation. I'll just read carefully. The dad doesn't come, but he tells kids on the phone that it's because the mom doesn't let. Basically where one spouse or another is alienating or attempting to alienate from the other parent. It is. How do you do it? How do you manage on both on the legal side? I guess maybe less so on the legal, maybe more on the Dr. Castro side. How do you do it in a way without disparaging in this case, the dad from the question maker? I guess I'll start with Dr. Castro.
I mean, again, I would say, I would say that the best way is to be quite truthful with the child and try to say, for instance, do you feel that I usually do things like that? Okay, let's say you don't let that the child, you were talking about the father telling the child that the mother is not letting him see the child, right?
Mhm.
I would say that at that point, I would try to reality test with the child and say, is it your experience that I usually do things like that? Would I, uh, does it feel like this is something that you would believe that I could do something like that? And then say, maybe we should try then. I mean, because if the child says no, but this is what dad says that you are doing, I could say, well, look, we may try to then make an appointment where you're going to be able to go see your dad. And I will let you know exactly when it is. And we are going to try to see if this happens or not. You see, I would reality test because I think that the child needs to live in in reality. The child needs to be exposed to as much of the reality as it is appropriate for their age or for their situation, of course, but not have the impression that the fate of the child is negotiated between parents behind his back.
Got it.
You see, so that's very important because then the child believes what he or she is experiencing, not
Understood.
what he is told. Right.
Dr. Guy, I like that answer. I'm going to skip to the last question, and which really is the truth is the last question we got is unfortunately probably like the worst case examples of yours, which is basically where you have a parent, a spouse, where I guess they have an agreement, and I guess this is post judgment. They're both expected to contribute to keeping the child in yeshiva and to pay. One spouse says they can't afford to pay, and they I guess plead poverty. And what do you, I guess, what I mean, the questioner is asking what could be done to keep that child in yeshiva, which but I'm sure in these kind of situations, Bob, this becomes it probably ends up going back in the courts if the spouse is not living up to their agreement. I'm guessing, correct?
Well, if it's because stated financial hardship, then that's it. Show me your tax returns, show me your pay stubs.
Right.
Hopefully all income is on the books, but a court will keep a kid in the same school system, in the same yeshiva, same camps, if it's financially feasible. So that's the type of thing that if you determine that the person really can afford it, then that's an easy one in court, to be honest. That's very straightforward. If it's not affordable, they're going to say if it was an intact household, you can only do what you can afford. So then you look for scholarships. Very often in a settlement agreement, you have to say each parent's responsible 50%. One parent can go in and plead poverty to yeshiva and have fees waived and tuition waived. So,
have you ever had to actually go in as an attorney and deal directly with the school, speak to a scholarship committee?
Oh, I won't do. No, the parents will do that. They listen. Schools don't want to be involved in litigation. They certainly don't want the attorneys in there, and we really have no place in there. We don't add to the process. We just clog it up. Really.
That's an interesting admission. Okay.
Yeah.
So just some final words of advice. We're almost up. An hour's almost up for our listeners struggling with the divorce. I'm just gonna Bob give us some final words, and Dr. Castro give us some final words as well, and also certainly want to hear how to reach you guys as well. So
to me, the most basic theme is take control of your life and take control of your kids to the extent you should be controlling them. Control the narrative. So in other words, when you frame issues with your ex, especially a difficult ex, what I was saying earlier, you narrowly construct what you're discussing. Stick to the subject. Don't get off topic. And then pick your fights. Not everything has the same level of importance to it. So if yeshiva is the most important, and you have a disagreement as to that, and where funds are going to be going because there's only limited funds, that's your subject that you should stay with until that's exhausted. But the more you can control yourself and understand that not every issue is worth fighting about. Listen to what Dr. Castro is saying, that your household's going to be different, your opinions are going to be different, and just try to enjoy yourself and your kids. Not everything is going to be exactly the way you want it. Accept that and make the best of it, and really just let your kids grow up stress-free as much as possible, because they're already starting behind the 8 ball in a broken household.
Thank you. Dr. Castro, any final thoughts?
Well, I am going to second the, pick your fight, meaning, go with the flow with all the things that you can go with the flow and try to enjoy the process. Trust yourself. Trust your child. Your child is going to be okay as long as you make sure that you can give them a good parenting as you can, and pick the fights that you cannot resolve by going with the flow, with looking for help. Try to find people who can help you to resolve the problems that have to be resolved by somebody else.
I like that final thought. So, Dr. Castro, just tell all our watchers, and also thank you for the nice comment that just came in about the webinar. I'm not sure if everyone's seeing it who's watching, but tell us how we can reach you, and then Bob also tell us. Go ahead, Dr.
Okay.
Castro. Where can we reach you?
I have an email address. I have a telephone number. So you can always call me or
share those with us, by the way, or share your website.
Okay, so my email address is D as in doctor, R as in doctor, N as in Nadine Castro, DRN Castro, at gmail.com. And my phone number is 212-721-2549. You can always find me there.
Thank you. And thank you very much for participating. And Bob, well, I know one place I know where to find you is in the Jewish Link. Okay.
Yes.
I also happen to know, because I tried, is I also typed in family law in my Google search, and you also come up. Okay. So that means that's an easy one, but tell us where else to find you. So.
Well, the firm name is Kornitzer Family Law. We're in Paramus is the main office. You can Google me and it'll pop up, and phone number is 201-292-8444. And just look at the website, and it'll have articles also that'll be interesting, some of the subjects we discussed, and I'll have all the contact information as well, including all email addresses.
Thank you, Bob. Hopefully we'll see a few more pieces. I think the plan was for you to write a little bit more for the Jewish Link. I think if you have time. Unfortunately, it seems like you don't have time. It seems like you're pretty busy.
We're busy, but we have time as well.
Thanks again so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Castro.
Thank you
very much. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.